So I've been following that series, Change My Mind on YouTube by Steven Crowder, and I've been making some responses, and I came across one that was called America is Superior, Change My Mind. And this was one where I thought was quite different than some of his other things, because in the other uploads that he's done, he normally has a very well-structured platform, because those are much more political, and this is definitely just something that is more, I guess, just sort of an opinion, really. It's a very opinionated one about, America is superior. One of the largest things that I noticed with Crowder was that he talked about the Bill of Rights a lot, most specifically the First Amendment and the Second Amendment, and he was asking everybody, something such as, do other countries have freedom of speech? And everybody sort of had the same sort of response, and I understood, I think, the sentiment, but he was really trying to come at it from a different way by saying, they don't have a constitutional right to freedom of speech, therefore they are inferior. But in reality, I think the people he was debating really all had the same response. They were like, hey, other countries have a fair amount of free speech. Other countries have a lot of free speech. It's just, why do they need this constitutional amendment to say that it is superior? I mean, there are so many. You can talk freely in other nations, and to just pull out isolated incidents about this person said something bad about Muslims, therefore they are, they went to jail, or somebody did a Nazi salute in a video or featured a Nazi salute in a video and they got in trouble with the law. I mean, those are isolated incidents and they don't prove anything. Furthermore, why is the constitutional amendment that deals with free speech an immediate form of criteria to determine what the greatest nation in the world is? He never really fortified his premise that much. It was more just getting other people to sort of, kind of to fall into some sort of argumentative trap. But in reality, other nations around the world, countless nations, have, open dialogue, and they have, an open expression of ideas. And I don't really feel bad if we're going to, talk about hate groups aren't allowed to say the N-word, or certain people in Germany and Austria can't do Nazi salutes and things like that are illegal. I don't lose any sleep over that. And guess what? If they banned the N-word in America, or if they said in America Nazi salutes are illegal, I would follow those laws and I wouldn't care at all. And I'm sure you would too. After a week, the shock would just be like, oh well, life's pretty much the same. You just don't say the N-word and you just don't do Nazi salutes. So, that's all there really is to it. I don't really think that the bans on free speech that he is talking about are an immediate qualifier to make America superior as opposed to inferior. Moreover, he brought up the example of how Luxembourg has higher wages than America. Oh, why not a nation like Luxembourg being the greatest nation in the world or something? Let me say, which nation has a larger role in the military-industrial complex, the United States or Luxembourg? Which one had a larger role, in the bombings in Iraq and the destabilization of nations, such as Chad in the 1980s or Yemen currently going on now? Was it Luxembourg or the United States? The United States, one thing that was never discussed was just the U.S. role in just military domination. Crowder did bring that up, and he sort of said that, what time is it now? It's 3:12. By 4:12, America could take over Canada if they wanted to. I view that as a bad thing, and many people do. That doesn't score you any points. That just means, it's so much military power that you don't know what to do with. That's not superior. That's a bad thing. Your definition of superior is very subjective, and it doesn't immediately push America over the top in any sort of superior edge if you're just going to say that they can become the policeman of the world anytime they want. This is why libertarians, which Crowder claims to be, are opposed to things like that. They're opposed to the military policing of the world. They're opposed to all these bases and, these enormous amounts of defense spending that are just sucking all the money out of the American, budget, when it doesn't have to be that way. And it doesn't. So it's just sort of why do you think that is, instantly putting America in a level of superiority? let's look at all the things that have gone on around the world. We talked about Yemen and Chad and Syria. What about the drawn-out conflicts in nations like Iraq, which George W. Bush, threw us into that giant quagmire when, once again, something like that should not have happened. Moreover, what about things like Cambodia, Vietnam, Southeast Asia? They're still having trouble with the chemical warfare, Agent Orange dioxin. It's like, who put that there? Was it the United States or was it Switzerland? It's like, you want to talk about the greatest nation in the world and any sort of superior nation. Our foreign policy is disastrously monstrous. It's, causing havoc all over the world. And there are a lot of nations that do not do that. Just to sort of zone in on two things like freedom of speech, and then maybe you're going to talk about some things like, wages and healthcare, 2 or 3 things. That doesn't mean that a nation is superior. Think of all the countries in the world that are not killing people by the hundreds of thousands. It's just, it's not really a fair criteria, and it's definitely not a sort of honest discussion to sort of say that America is superior just for those reasons. America is my homeland. The only passport I have is American. It's all I've got. Yes, of course, it's my country, but we have to admit that America is very, very imperfect. I can't even really pinpoint one superior nation in the world. And, I think that would also refute the premise that America is superior. I would just be like, no nation has any sort of maximum superior nature, no maximum superior status. And any time you put up any nation as some sort of superior, on a superior pedestal, you're just going to knock it right down because we are all so flawed. So I can't really accept anything of that nature. But, it's like, think about all the countries in the world that are just so different. Maybe there's a nation that respects indigenous rights in a better manner than the Americans do. America is very terrible at honoring Native American treaties. And even things like the annexation of Hawaii in 1893 were possibly done, completely in an illegitimate manner by not acknowledging the initial indigenous government. America has a huge history of that. Maybe there's another nation out there that's also better with ecology and preservation. And, is America really the best, when it comes to things like, literacy and education? It sounds like there are nations out there like Singapore that have much higher literacy rates. So, how do we get off trying to say that America is superior? There are so many giant flaws in America that are just not accounted for in sort of the assessment that's put forward by Crowder. And once again, I really would have to reiterate that as soon as you make that statement that, it is impossible to say that one country is the most superior in the world, that refutes his, entire argument that America is superior. And he brought up so many examples about Canada, and most people went to Europe. But what about things like, you could say Palau or the Marshall Islands has a better deal because they get a lot of privileges of America through the Compact of Free Association Agreement. But they're also allowed to preserve their own indigenous culture and have honor of their own traditions. You could choose any country in the world and you could make your own argument about why you think that they are the best. What about something like Liechtenstein? They have prosperity, they have economic success, they stay out of wars, they're very, very neutral, and they aren't running around causing this giant military police state for planet Earth. Why isn't Liechtenstein the most superior nation in the world? You could probably choose out of maybe 180 nations out of the 263 recognized things in the world, you could probably choose 180 of them that would have, a high sense of argumentation for being the most superior nation in the world, and I wouldn't accept any of it. I would just say that there is no real superior nation in the 21st century. We have to remember that the 21st century is going to be about internationalism, not about nationalism. That's going to be sort of a relic of the past. And it's just, you want to talk about relics of the past? What about the United States Constitution? He's so big on the First Amendment, the Second Amendment, and, when the Constitution was written, a black person was counted as 3/5 of a human being. Women didn't have the right to vote. It says all men are created equal. And don't tell me that means all mankind. No, it doesn't say that. It says all men are created equal. Not only does that eliminate women, it also eliminates children. And furthermore, it's also, very specific to white men. And white men who did not own property weren't given the right to vote. So it's like, it's based on this very, very flawed sense of, only giving rights to white landowning males. And it's just, we don't have to live that way anymore. We can sort of move forward. And our Constitution, although it is, imperfect, it does give us the chance to evolve. I believe under Article 5 it allows us to call for a new constitutional convention, which we definitely should, because we don't have to live in the 18th century forever. We can take this plan and move forward. So that gives us, it doesn't mean that the Constitution is absolute dog shit. It is not. It's just, it is, an imperfect document that can be improved upon. It is imperfect, though, so just to sort of say, because we have a First Amendment, that the Constitution is something that is so great, it was written by a bunch of slave owners over 200 years ago. That's their way. We can make our way for the 21st century, and we don't have to follow all of these sort of arbitrary things that are put in there that are all based on these things that we have gotten rid of. Like, now we have given women the right to vote. Slavery has been abolished, we have universal suffrage in the 21st century, and we recognize children as human beings as opposed to property like the way Immanuel Kant thought they were. It's just, we have evolved so much, and we just need to keep evolving. And the way you do that is, once again, you recognize our role in the global community as being just part of planet Earth as opposed to only being part of America. And the first thing we have to do is a massive reduction in our military involvement in this sort of global police state, and just get away from, bankrupting ourselves on all of these unnecessary wars. Nobody wants the wars except for the defense contractors and some of the Congress people that they've bought out, and nobody wants to see any of their friends and family members get killed overseas, or even you get killed overseas if you are serving. So it's like, to say that America is superior to all other nations, I mean, for starters, that's an opinionated statement, which there really isn't any sort of scientific way to verify. Secondarily, I mean, you can't really establish any perfect criteria about why America would be the most superior nation in the world from an argumentative standpoint. And thirdly, I mean, America has so many problems. America is my country, but it is a very, very flawed, messed up piece of land. From sea to shining sea, though. And it's like, we really have a lot of improving to do. Instead of putting on a giant silly hat and talking about how America is so much more superior than Canada, mais quel dommage, it's like, you can also think about how can we strive forward and improve the nation that we live in and be part of one single planet Earth in the 21st century. All right, well, thank you for listening to my little rebuttal against Steven Crowder's statement, America is superior. Jumbled a few words there, got a little bit of the mumbling going on, but please excuse me for all that, and thank you if you've made it this far into the recording. All right, that's all for me now. Until next time.